Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to today's episode, Bound by Grace podcast, where we're diving into one of the most tender and complex dynamics in marriage, navigating faith when beliefs don't align. Our guest, Holly Rennels, is a personal wordsmith whose gift for language is matched only by her grace in living out love across spiritual differences. Holly and her husband came into their marriage from completely different religious backgrounds, worlds apart in doctrine, tradition, and upbringing. Yet over time, they've cultivated a relationship that's not only healthy and cohesive, but deeply respectful and spiritually rich. In this conversation, Holly shares how they've built trust without forcing conformity, how they've handled theological tension without emotional maturity, and how their differences have actually deepened their connection. Whether you're in an interfaith relationship, wrestling with spiritual shifts in your marriage, or simply curious about how love can thrive across belief systems, Holly's story offers wisdom, hope, and a refreshing dose of honesty. Let's get into it. How are you doing today?
I am very well, thanks. How are you?
Good. I specifically said, hopefully we don't have any mess ups. And then I messed up twice on the introduction. That is something else. Like, I can't make this stuff up. But I do want to give you the floor and let you tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
So I have been a Christ follower for about 47 years now. I have 2 adult children, one recently college graduate and the another just graduated from PA school. She is married. My husband and I have been married for 28 years. And we did come out of different faith traditions. In my day job, I'm a retail manager. In my side hustle, I'm a writer. Personal wordsmith just means that I write predominantly for weddings and funerals and things that are very meaningful to people. But I do it all from a biblical worldview. I try to do everything from a biblical worldview. And I'm just super excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome. I'm happy you're here too. I think this is going to be a really good episode for those that are struggling with the same type of thing. So again, we're going into being married from different religious backgrounds. We've already done different political backgrounds. Now we're diving into different religious backgrounds because this is a real thing that happens to people, especially those that dive into marriage when you don't discuss those faith-based or just foundational-based questions prior to marriage. And that happens a lot. I've done it. So this is definitely for you if you're in that boat. For our audience, this is going to be more of a Q&A style. So I'll be asking Holly some questions and we'll just let her give us the answer. So the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your different religious backgrounds? What were your beliefs and values like when you first met?
Well, my husband was raised in the Catholic tradition. He was raised in a home where his father did not attend church. His father's parents were Baptists, but his father was really not instrumental in his faith. And his mother was very devout. She was raised by another devout Catholic. So fundamentally, morally, very, hard work ethic, good moral character, those types of things. And he was definitely a believer, but he was raised with a lot of strict ritual, full catechism, all of the typical things that a young Catholic boy would go through. He did. And when we met, he was in grad school and I was a recent graduate of the University of Georgia, and he was attending mass every Saturday night, never missed a week, very staunch and adherent Catholic. Yeah. I was raised in a Pentecostal tradition. So, in further spectrums apart, it could not be. Yes. So I was raised with lots of charismatic worship, and we were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. If there was a revival or vacation Bible school or anything, we were in the building. My parents were very active in the church. I was fortunate that both of my parents attended church. And my mother was a Sunday school teacher. Dad led music. He even played bass for Southern gospel groups. throughout the years. So, and I grew up, I literally don't remember the first time I sang in church. I was just handed a microphone. There's a picture of me somewhere between 2 and 3. And I've just always participated in church. So it was very important to me as well. Now, as a college student, I was not quite as morally on track as I should have been. We will say I stepped a little bit away from my faith, not in dramatic fashion, but to some extent. And I was still attending church every week when I met my husband. But the first season of our dating, we would go to mass on Saturday night and then either go have dinner or go to a movie. And then he would come pick me up for church on Sunday morning. And then we would either go to brunch or try to do something because we were both involved in school and work full time. So, that was pretty much our whole weekend was spent half in church, which is not the worst thing. But once we kind of saw this relationship was going somewhere rather quickly, we had to make some assessments about that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Just from another Pentecostal to you, have you ever been to Winterfest?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I loved Winterfest. Winterfest changed my life.
Absolutely.
Like that. I want my kids to go to Winterfest so bad. We're in a non-denominational church right now. So I kind of want to figure out how to get them to Winterfest, but it was amazing.
My nephew and his wife work with the youth at the church I go to. They go every fall. They go every year to Winterfest still.
Okay.
So I'll get you his information. They can just
Yes,
go with them.
please. Yeah, that sounds,
Yeah.
that would be perfect. Yes, I would love that. So were there early tensions in your relationship around faith or spiritual practices? How did you navigate them?
Absolutely. So growing up musical, I had sang at Catholic weddings and funerals and been in Catholic services before, but I'd never attended as a parishioner until I started dating my husband. And I was horribly offended by the fact that I couldn't take communion. And I didn't fully understand the Eucharist at the time. I got educated quickly, but I'm like, what do you mean? I'm baptized.
Yeah.
I can't do this. I know Jesus. And so that kind of struck me. But my husband had a terrible, terrible experience with some Baptist Student Union leaders, we'll call them, who basically confronted him. I mean, within a week of him arriving at the University of Georgia and telling him he was going to hell if he was Catholic, like no love, no grace, no, let me get to know this person and witness to him. None of that. It was so he got he became very offended, obviously, by that, but a little bit, he kind of started distancing himself from non-Catholics. So when my best friend introduced us and we went to dinner a couple times and realized we wanted to actually date, I was kind of like, oh, he's a Catholic. And he was a little bit like, she's not Catholic. Like it was a little bit of a thing initially. But what helped us is before we were married, we became pregnant. And so things got real serious real quick. And we had to make some decisions. And we both, and this was God, absolutely God intervening, we both came to the conclusion that my husband did not want to raise a family without him present in church. He had grown up like that, and that was not going to be his family. We were going to be a family. We were going to get married very quickly, and we did. And God was in all of it. Well, he wasn't in the mistake that we made, but he was in our family plan. And so when we were making good, godly decisions, once we were kind of brought back to ourselves, we just decided we needed to understand what beliefs we thought we held and then get in the word and make some good decisions. So the youth pastor at my mom and dad's church was willing to do our premarital counseling. Believe it or not, there were some people, even ministers in my own family, who weren't willing to marry us or do our premarital counseling. I don't understand that exactly, but they have a right to their beliefs. And so we were fortunate that we were this pastor's first premarital counseling. So he was kind of learning along with us, but for us, that was exactly where God wanted us, because we really had to do some investigation on our own. And so though there were tensions, we both had the same goal. So as we dug through it, there were some things that I had been thought I believed growing up that I couldn't find in the word. And my husband had the same experience. And it was very eye-opening. And honestly, it was a little unsettling at first.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, wait a minute, but I thought that said, and when you're reading it for yourself in intense study for the first time, it was just eye-opening. And we really started focusing on what actually matters. You know, what does God insist upon? What are the keys of getting into the kingdom? And what is extraneous? What is extra? What is man-made? What it does not inform true belief? And it was not a quick process by any stretch, but because we both came at it from the purposes of building a good, godly family, God bless that time. Mm-hmm. And we did come to some good conclusions. God placed us in an independent Methodist church first. And that minister, I'll never forget him. His name was Dick Horde. And they were very formal almost. There were acolytes. He wore a robe. They had departed the United Methodist over LGBTQ issues. So they were very biblically sound. And this man just had such the heart and mind of Christ. He was so able to speak to us and really kind of nurtured us toward, again, what does God insist upon? What are the absolute truths in this word that matter, and what are separate? What are what isn't something that matters to your family? So it was a long 2.5-year season of growth and discovery. And I'm not going to pretend that there weren't some discussions and disagreements, but a lot of what we disagreed about, they couldn't find in the Bible. Right. One of us held a belief that wasn't actually in there. And sadly, coming out of the tradition I came out of, sometimes it was me. I mean, as much, it was pretty equal, to be honest. And then there were certain things from the Catholic Church, some of the dogmas, my husband was like, well, I don't believe that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you're not such a good Catholic, I'm not trying to make light of it, but some people really, you grow up in a tradition and you almost believe in the tradition more than the Bible. And I think it's innocent. I don't think anybody means to do that, or maybe some do, but most people don't. You just find yourself there. And I think that's the underlying lesson for anyone who might be going through that is the Bible tells us in Philippians to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And it's not because God's a terrorist. It's because he's holy. And we need to come to him earnestly and honestly and in awe of who he is. And the fact that the creator of the universe wants a relationship with me.
Yes.
And once you have the proper awe, it's a fear more of, I don't want to disappoint him. Like when you love your parent. It's not fear like he's going to strike me dead. It's more that awe and respect. And for 27, 28 years since we've really started this journey, I'm more in awe every day, and I think that's the real lesson. If you let God lead, he will. We just get out of his way. It's the best.
Absolutely. What were some prayers or hopes you held on to during seasons when you and your husband weren't spiritually aligned?
Oh, wow, that can be tough. The biggest hope we both had is that our children deserved an intact family and church together. We were both committed to raising godly children. And your commitment can overcome a lot of errors and mistakes and bad attitudes. And we've moved a couple of different times. Like we got married in Georgia, moved from Athens to North Atlanta, and then moved to Illinois. And there was pressure when we moved here 18 years ago. Not real pressure, but kind of the wink, wink, nudge, nudge pressure that we should convert and go to church with his mom as Catholics, and so of course those seasons happen, but fundamentally our hope was in Christ and our goal was to raise godly children. And we knew that we could not do that, taking them to mass one week and taking them to church another week.
Right.
But we also couldn't do that until we were fully informed about what we truly believed and what the Bible actually says. And not to pick on Catholics, but as much as Pentecostals can be selective with their scripture reading from time to time,
Yes.
Catholic children aren't necessarily encouraged to read the Bible for themselves much at all. You read it at Mass, and then you do the catechism.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are large swaths of the Bible that are completely ignored. And then there's a handful of, other books that are referenced that are not in the standard 66 books of Protestants. So that being said, there were seasons and things that occurred. And we, especially with my mother-in-law, I had a wonderful mother-in-law. She is now deceased. She loved her children. She loved the Lord, and she loved her grandkids with every ounce of herself. So we did things that were intentionally respectful of her. Christmas Eve Mass, Easter. My children were never forbidden to go to church with her. And we tried to make sure Mother's Day, there were times that because she usually attended services on Saturday evening, we were able to be very respectful of her and make sure she had her grandchildren with her for important things while not compromising our family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the ability to be respectful in those situations, particularly when you've got families with different belief systems, it's important, to take that time to be respectful and to understand what's truly important. Again, keep the first things first.
Right.
And so that helped bridge a lot of those things too, is I wasn't going to argue with her about sunrise service on Easter. We would just go with her. That was fine.
Right.
And I enjoyed it. I used to crack up though, because sometimes I would be very moved by the homily. They had a priest who actually clearly loved the Lord and was in tune, because he gave a homily. And I would just bawl, but that's how God deals with me sometimes.
Me too.
She would lean over and be like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Is everything okay?" It's just me being moved. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm a crier for sure. So I think you sort of touched on this in what changed in your husband's heart or in your home that started to draw you both into spiritual agreement. So what you were stating was your husband, because he came from a background where the dad didn't attend, he really wanted that union to work in a way that both of you attended together and showed that dynamic is aligned.
Absolutely.
So you two really focused on the Bible and finding those spiritual truths in the Word, and then just kind of figured out which route to take from that.
Absolutely. Our first year of marriage, until we found that Watkinsville Independent Methodist Church, we attended, because we started with the Protestant faiths that were closest to Catholicism. It's kind of how we just decided to start walking through it.
Yep.
And we had the weirdest experience. We had attended I totally lost the name of it. It's the Church of England, but what it is here in the United States. We attended those services a couple weeks in a row and went to a discovery class, and their female priest led it and said to us, we're like Catholic light, we're all of the sacraments and none of the guilt, which immediately turned us both off. I was like, you're saying that to people who just told you they're trying to figure out what your beliefs actually are, because they're still trying to figure out what their beliefs actually are. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And then I had a very close friend who was Lutheran. So we went to the Lutheran church with her a couple of times. It wasn't quite, and we just, as we prayed before, we prayed after, we read the Word. And it's not like we think anybody's necessarily wrong. It just wasn't what God was revealing to us.
Right.
And so it took time. And we definitely neither of us, we were both turned off by the United Methodist Church. It was a very, I don't know, it just didn't speak to us. And even though the Pentecostal faith I was raised in was the Church of God, and the underlying theology of the Church of God is Wesleyan. So I kind of thought that was probably closer to my side. And it just was, we probably went there a month. and I tried to understand what the teachings were. But that little independent Methodist is where we landed for a while. And then when we moved, we were like, oh, do we have to do this again? And one Sunday we were running late. We had planned to attend a different church. We visited 2 or 3. And there was this church like right around the corner from our house. And we were running late. And I'm like, that's the only church we have time to get to today. And it's not on the list, but let's just go. And it was this little community Bible church. And we were members there for years. And
wow.
God just placed it there at the right time. I have never been loved by women the way I was loved in that church.
I love that.
And they just embraced us and met us where we were, kind of, and put mentors in our life. And it was a tiny little church. They had Awana for the kids, it was just a wonderful experience. And then moving here, again, a little pressure to try to go back to the church my husband was raised in. And my daughter was doing a sleepover with someone, and my husband was out of town. And I said, well, I'll have to pick her up because, we're still visiting churches, but I'm going to take her to church. And the mom was like, oh, just go to church with us. I'm like, I kind of like you. I think I could. And we've been there 17 years.
That's hilarious.
So, God,
the way God works, I'm
door.
telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because it was that moment that she stayed the night with this particular person that went to this particular, it just is so intricate the way that he works.
And by some people's standards, I was very, very cautious about whose homes my children went to. So I had met and interviewed this woman, but she was the children's pastor. I didn't know that at the time. She was the children's pastor of this church. And so it kind of worked out. And we became very close friends. In fact, they've recently moved, and we will go visit them where they are now in South Carolina. But, it was one of those things where God just put the right people in our path. And so we've been there 17 years now. I sing on the worship team. We cook for our Bible study once a month, and fully involved. It's funny, though. And I don't know why I'm circling back to this here, but those people from the Baptist Student Union who approached my husband at the University of Georgia all those years ago were so concerned about him being saved, and certain circles in Christianity use that word and certain ones don't. And, but we had a horribly tragic year in 2001, and we were still fairly new in our journey. We were still living in the Athens area, still attending that little independent Methodist church and becoming involved there. My husband was helping coach football at one of the local Christian schools, and I was singing and playing piano at the church sometimes and helping with VBS. And I got a phone call that someone had died, and my brother-in-law had passed, and my husband was in Atlanta, miles away. I had a 2-year-old, 3-year-old almost.
Oh.
So I called the church pastor, and one of the things that made the biggest impression on me ever is the pastor and the church secretary drove to my home in different cars. Because he was a man, but they were the only two who could come. They came in separate cars so that she could watch my daughter and he could pray with me until my husband got home. And that is a nutshell of what that church experience was like. It was such a high integrity, you know what I mean? It just ministered to me on every level you can imagine, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, but the integrity of the people in that church was incredible. And that meant a lot to us. So when my husband called back after the pastor had gotten to my home and we had been praying, sorry, I may cry. He said, well, I need you to know I've just done something. I said, okay, hon. I said, if you can't get away, there's, it's not like the funeral's today or anything like that, but we were distraught. And he said, I just realized that I'd never actually been saved. I had never actually asked Jesus to be my Lord, and I just did that. And I was married to a moral man, a man who was going through the Bible with me, who was fully committed to me and raising our children to be godly. And God used a crisis to reveal to him, your relationship's incomplete. I know, I'm about to lose it too. He said, your relationship's incomplete until you do this. And I think the lesson is not just that your spiritual journey is a journey, it's a walk. We're walking with Jesus. Right. And if we are intent to do it his way, we will get closer with him throughout our entire life. But that day was so meaningful to me. And again, it was one of those moments with the Lord where I just felt so blessed that in a moment of crisis, my husband didn't turn to anger or distress or frustration. He turned to the Lord, and the Lord said, "Hey, by the way, let's take care of this right now. Make it complete, make it official." And I had to laugh. This has only been about a week ago. I usually bless the food at our house, not for any reason except that early in our marriage, I was far more comfortable praying out loud.
Right.
I pray at church services. I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm an upfront person a lot because that's my personality and my talents and gifts. And so I don't have a problem with it. My husband grabbed my hand the other day and he goes, "I need to start praying more over dinners." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "I feel like God wants me to." I'm like, "You're not going to get an argument from me." That's fine. But even now, in little simple things, God is still growing that man. And to me, that's the beauty of a real relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
It is the growth should never stop. At this point, our children are adults. Our children already have relationships with the Lord. We're blessed beyond measure. But he's still working on us.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it.
That is beautiful. Yeah, that's how I am in my home because I'm more comfortable. I'm the one that prays over the food. But we had a discussion, and my husband is a very quiet man. Very quiet man, doesn't share his emotions very often, and he is the most patient man I've ever met. Just very quiet. And he said a month ago, he said, "I really need to start focusing on my leadership in this family." What? Just God silently working in each and every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And to see it unfold is so beautiful. And I have to say, just that statement from him made me love him even more.
It's an interesting, to me, with my husband, it's a new reason to be proud of him. It's a new reason to be in love with him. It's just a new blessing. I mean, the Bible says that the blessings of God, the mercies of God, the grace of God is new every morning, and it's fresh. And, when I was a little kid, I used to sing a song called "He's Still Working on Me." As a little country church song that I used to sing. And it's so true. If we stay in tune with the Father, your faith never gets stale. He'll reveal something new to you. And sometimes it's not something you want to see. And sometimes it's something truly beautiful where, he's spoken to my husband and I need to take a step back and allow him to lead in that area because now he's ready.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything wrong with me blessing food, but it's great that he wants to. It's a beautiful
absolutely. Thing. Absolutely. So again, you sort of touched on this, but was there a particular small moment that brought you onto the same page spiritually?
There's been 1,000 of them,
So it was just all combined moments, just bringing you onto the same page over time.
Absolutely. To Daryl's credit, he was very firm in his commitment to raising his family in church when the intact family was in church. That was critical to him. It was important to me, but that was, a hill he was going to die on. So wherever we were going to do that, it needed to be done. And I appreciated that tremendously because it was as a point of agreement. And so, and sometimes I think the harder navigation was simple things. Like I grew up in a church with a drum set and a bass and he grew up with a children's choir and an organist and, one person leading singing and finding the cultural pieces of the church that fit better from time to time. And visiting churches could be challenging for those reasons. but we were both committed. Once God had kind of revealed to us some of our own erroneous beliefs, God really allowed us to move into that place where we had the same ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were willing to allow him to lead us to that better place. But it was little moments. Routinely, God used something on a regular basis to draw us closer together and closer to that goal.
So if you're okay, I think I'm going to go off script and ask a couple of questions that I think would be really helpful to our audience on this particular subject.
Of course.
So I know you were navigating and diving deep into the Bible on the religious aspect, on where to go for church and exactly how to worship and things like that. But when we talk about kids, when your child was born, or maybe before your child was born, how did you guys come to the same conclusion on what things you would celebrate, what traditions you would take note to, and things like that?
Right. Well, first, because we were pregnant before we were married, the first great relief I had is that he was fully committed to me and the child, that we were going to be a family and we were going to allow God to lead. We were going to move into a biblical household as quickly as possible. We did not cohabitate before we were married or anything like that. And it was important to me that we stood on the same firm foundation, even if we had not always followed our own convictions, to be honest.
Right.
So I was relieved and grateful that we were in agreement on that. We both came from intact homes. And so the fact that we weren't going to have to shuffle and move, and that we were committed to keeping our home together, was really important to me. And that was something we did not have to stress about. We put our families on a rotating calendar. And when we lived in Georgia and would visit here, we just went to church with his mother. We just participated in whatever she wanted to do, not necessarily just to keep the peace, but more because we were visiting. We did not live here. We were more than happy to, again, show her the respect and deference of being her guest and letting her, I allowed the priest to bless the babies. I mean,
right.
It was a blessing, and they're praying through Jesus. So I didn't have an issue with that.
Right.
In fact, my daughter was born in a Catholic hospital. And when the sisters came by, they knew we weren't Catholic, so they would ask permission. And again, that was just one of those things that nothing in my spirit ever spoke to me that we should not do it that way. The traditions, though, were more about family than about faith specifically, because other than attending service on Christmas Eve, are you there?
I am here. Are you there?
I am
Give
here.
me
My
just a
screen just went
second.
blank. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna remove you from here and then put you back on.
Okay.
Nope, for some reason I still hear your voice, so we can keep going. Just for some reason your camera isn't quite wanting to work.
That's crazy, because it was working great.
I know.
All right. Well, I will continue to talk then. But, like the traditions with our family early on were more about family than faith. My husband even was not baptized as an infant. So like the christening and those types of things were something that he didn't have strong feelings about either. So our children were not baptized until they accepted Christ and requested to be baptized. In fact, I got a call from Christian summer camp from my daughter. Can you be here tomorrow at 2:00? They're baptizing me in the swimming pool. So I'm like, I can, but now I have to go make some arrangements,
Yeah.
kind of thing, because I'm not missing that. And it was fun, but my son was really young. And the youth pastor and children's minister was a little cautious about it. She goes, well, we do a baptism class, but, if you're willing to let him. And my son is very emotionally mature and has always been a little advanced. And so she said, if you feel like he's ready, I said, well, let him do the class. And if you think he understands enough to make this commitment, then, we'll do that. And so she came here actually to our home and walked him through the Bible, and he could articulate exactly what he believed. And, she was going to baptize him that following Sunday and had a death in her family. And so I said, son, do you want to allow her to baptize you? Do you want mom to do it? Oh, we're back. Do you want mom to do it, or do you want us to get another member of the the ministerial staff to do it? And his favorite preacher at that time was Pastor Casey that we had. And he said, would you call Casey and see if he would do it? Because I can't wait. I'm like, oh, absolutely. I will make that phone call. And then I called Casey, and his response was, did you just say sick him to a bulldog? Yeah. You want to do it now? Like, do you want to wait? Do we have to wait till Sunday? Like, I was like, yes, Sunday's great. But, so it was, some of the traditions of Catholicism really just never seems to be an issue for him. I think honestly, taking my children from our non-denominational church home to my mom's church that has had some interesting transitions through Pentecost over the years, has required more explanation. And not so much how we celebrate holidays or anything like that. It's been more of, why were they waving flags again? What was happening? And I'm like, okay, I can do this. And it's funny because when I grew up, people made a very profound distinction between Pentecostal and charismatic. Mm-hmm. And now they've kind of merged into one thing. And people even call it the Pentecostal charismatic tradition, but in many ways they are quite different.
They're very different.
So, but there were phases of some of the charismatic teachings that came into my home church. And then it's much more now like what I grew up in, even though the pastor they have now is, if it's not in the Bible, he didn't say it. He is it's the strictest, most biblical teaching. And I'm so pleased for them because they've been through a lot as a church, that God is just foundational truth time. You know what I mean? We don't have time for side issues. We don't have time for politics in the pulpit. We are going to teach the word, and that's all we're teaching because that's what God requires. Yes. And for people who lead in any capacity who claim Christ, you're held to a higher standard. You need to be very careful the words we choose. And anytime I stop and think, I'm saying that to myself. It's like, I want to say this exactly right because I would never want to misrepresent the Bible or the church or Christ himself, because that's on me. If other people are within the sound of my voice, I'm responsible for what they hear. And I don't think we teach that level of responsibility to people in the church sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. Was there a moment where your differences made your relationship kind of on edge and heated? Or did you always keep calm?
Oh, no. We're not calm people. It's hard to remember, to be honest. I never pressured my husband to be Pentecostal, and he never attempted to pressure me to be Catholic. Any pressure like that was, like I said, it was adjacent from his mother and more out of, I think, sincerely, deeply held beliefs that she was out of concern. I don't think it was malicious. I never read her that way. Like I said, she was wonderful to me and my children and doted on my husband, and she was everything a good, godly mother should be. But the pressure was really, for me, was I thought I understood my own beliefs, and to have to face it was pride. I don't know what else to call it. There was a pridefulness in I always win at Bible drill. I always win at Bible trivia. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I hate to admit that. That's so embarrassing, but it's true. There was a pride that I did not recognize as pride at the time of wanting to be right, wanting to be correct because I had more detail. And then when I was confronted with the words in red and having to deal with that, that's more what, that natural defensiveness that you can get into with your spouse, that natural things you allow arguments to come out of details that really don't have bearing on the issue. And
Right.
so that, of course, occurred. The first few years were not simple at all. But again, the focus was on the commitment. What is our ultimate goal? And you and I were speaking off camera about reasoning skills. I developed a new level of true reasoning and discernment in those first 3 years when we were really having to go through the word and our beliefs and things that weren't in the word and all of that part of it, because my opinion is irrelevant if it isn't in there. What
Right.
I think about something doesn't matter. And some of those crazy detail things, stories that are interesting. And even when I grew up in the time when everybody was studying the book of Revelation ad nauseum, and trying to figure out what all the symbolism was and, and all of those things. And there's nothing wrong with reading that book. But the book of Revelation by itself is probably not the best testament to God's love and kindness and the forgiveness that will actually allow you to enter the kingdom. So
Mhm.
keeping myself narrowly focused on the primary issues was the bigger battle for me. And again, having to confront beliefs that I really thought I held and then not finding them in the Bible was a struggle. And my husband felt some of that as well. Especially that it was the dogmas more of the Catholic Church where he's like, I don't think that. I don't believe that. And so having those realizations in your 20s after a lifetime of being a churchgoer, it's a little bit, it kind of puts you in an identity crisis,
Yeah. Yeah.
where the bedrock is still a fundamental belief in God and a fundamental belief in family and a fundamental belief in church attendance, that these things are important to raising good, healthy, well-adjusted children who love the Lord
Mhm.
and get to go to heaven. That's the goal. Now strip everything else away. That was the hard part. What was that refining process of getting to allowing yourself to not be defensive, to not be so beholden to something that might not have been exactly true. It was truth
Yeah.
adjacent. It was kind of close to really being in there. And people are flawed. So flawed things make it into our reasoning and our beliefs all the time, but it's our job to confront them and define them and to get rid of them. So that was the hardest season, those first couple of years, really understanding what the Bible actually said about those fundamental things.
What would be your advice to someone that's young yet married and dating? What would be your advice to them? Just what would be your advice to them?
Fundamental things matter. And to major in the majors, don't major in minor things. And if you are dating by the second date, you should know if this person's a believer and not just a church attender, but someone who actually has a relationship with Jesus. It's important beyond this world. It's important beyond more than anything, because if you are going to develop feelings for this person that make you think you want to share your life with them, is this life enough? If you love them enough to live this life with them, then you love them enough to be in the next one. And that's what love is wanting someone's greatest good. I mean, I don't know. There's a Jewish commentator who said one time, I don't know how to feel about my Christian friends who don't try to proselytize me. If you really think it's of eternal significance, why would you not share the gospel with me?
Right.
And I really do. And you can do it in a way that's not preachy and not judgy, because I don't get to sit in the judgment seat. I've made as many mistakes as anybody else. That's not my calling. And I routinely tell people, don't believe it because I said it. Follow my scripture references and go read it. I don't have to speak for God. He has spoken, and he gave us that book, those 66 books that will guide your life if you'll allow it to. So it's important to stay focused on that. And the hardest part for me when dating is I did not appreciate how naive I was, really, for a time. And I think young Christian women find themselves there, especially if you're from a small town. But to always guard your heart and your mind. The Bible tells us to take every thought captive. So when you start wistfully dreaming about the wedding on your third date, pull yourself back to reality. Take that thought captive. You're not ready for that unless you know his relationship with Christ and how this individual would lead your home. And it's important to agree on some really fundamental things. What are his beliefs about divorce? What are his beliefs about raising children and how many children? What are his beliefs about handling money? Is it your money or is it God's money? More people divorce over money than anything else, more than sex. That's statistically true. And sometimes the money leads to the other, but you know what I mean? Like infidelity can occur in a number of different ways in a marriage. And so making sure that you are equally yoked in fundamental beliefs about God, about family, about money, and about boundaries with your family.
Boundaries are big.
Boundaries are everything. Because as much as I love my son-in-law, and I adore him, we got a 10 out of 10. And my daughter is blessed because she's married to a very good man. And he is blessed because he's married to a very good woman. They're a new family. They're not, you know what I mean? We're now the extended family. They're not, he didn't join our family. That would be toxic. Not because we're a toxic family, but because that's not what you're supposed to leave and cleave to one another. And you can't cleave to someone you don't trust. If you get a pit in your stomach every time he's out of your sight, he's not the one.
Oh, I know that's right. Yeah.
Women who get crazy jealous, I'm like, that's your gut speaking to you. That is the Spirit of God saying something to you. I don't know what it's saying, but one or the other of you is not trustworthy in this situation. If you are always anxious,
or it could be trauma, could be past trauma that you need to deal with before you start a new relationship.
Because marriage cannot be 50-50. That's a lie of Satan. A family and a marriage has to be 100-100. It is. Because neither one of you is perfect 100% of the time, but your commitment needs to be 100-100. 50-50 ends in divorce. It just doesn't work. And because some days it's 90-10. Some days I'm so exhausted that my husband is 90% of this marriage. And some days it's the other way around. Yes. I mean, but if you're both 100 at the commitment level, then you're able to endure those times when one of you is emotionally exhausted or 9 months pregnant or whatever it is.
Right. I like that advice. I think that's really good. What about someone that is interested in marriage, but they're a believer, but the other person is an atheist?
Well, I think being an atheist, and it's going to sound crazy, but it's the truth. I think someone who's an atheist is a fundamentally dishonest person. Not that they're a liar. It's not that. But they are dishonest about, or either dishonest or prideful about their own intellect. They believe that they can know something to be 100% true. And there's no such certainty. There is no such certainty. And so I find, though, that the people I have known who are atheists are actually closer to conversion than the more honest person who might be an agnostic, who won't commit to believing or not believing, or, or who doesn't even want to ponder the question. So if the other person is an atheist, you need to get real honest with God. You need to ask God to reveal himself. And I have had atheists in my home who were friends of my children or, people in my family or whatever. And when they ask me, how can you be so sure? I'm like, because I know him. Like the people who know a famous person or a politician can tell you all these great and wonderful things about them because they know them. I don't know that stuff because I don't know them. I can tell you about God because I know him. I've been walking with him since I was a very small child. And when I've messed up, he has remained the same. I'm the one who's always been astray or been wrong. So I am very comfortable and confident speaking about God. Now, I can't tell you about every single book in the Bible. As much as I've read them, I don't know them that at that level like I know the Lord. But when someone is seeing someone with whom they are unequally yoked at that level, I recommend that you stop and pray. And if the person is at all seeking, at all open, have them pray. God, if you're there, God's big enough. He can take it. You're not going to, people I walk around acting like God's some delicate flower. God can take any thought, doubt. I've argued with him, yelled at him, grieved with him, cried to him, all of those things because he knows me too. And he knows this person, even if they're choosing not to know him. And if they will at least open themselves to ask him to reveal himself, then the faith part is to trust that he will. And your obedience part is to not proceed until he does.
Right.
I appreciate that can be difficult. That's why I say a second date question is to determine if they're a believer or not.
Yeah. Don't get too
Critically
far
important.
in
Nope.
without actually asking those important questions, because you don't want to allow yourself to start to feel, because it's so hard to pull yourself back at that point.
And I again, not to go back to a conversation we had off camera, but part of what I'm working in now in Titus 2 is trying to help young women get out of living in their emotions. Mm-hmm. Your emotions will lie to you. The Bible says nothing so deceitful as your heart. It's important to guard your heart, to guard your emotions, to guard your body too. That's critically important, but your body's going to follow your brain. If you take those thoughts captive and don't allow yourself to believe false things and don't allow yourself to become too deep into a relationship with someone who does not hold your beliefs, who will not be a good life and family partner for you, then you're protecting yourself. And again, if it's God, he'll move. He absolutely will. My husband and I got very impatient at the beginning of our relationship. We were so drawn to each other, so in love with each other. I would still have my family had I not rushed God. I know that. I know that this is the man I'm supposed to spend this life and eternity with. And I know that these two children are the children God had for us. And I know that we have been blessed beyond measure because we've followed God's way more than we haven't. We're not perfect, not even close, but God's way will always supersede your own plans, because he always has a better plan. When you think you have the right business plan and things are frustrating you, it's because God's planned something better. It's going to bless you more. It's going to bless more people because of you. And if we can really learn to trust that, and I'm in my 50s and just getting there, but just barely, when we trust God's plan is truly best, the blessings that will come, the blessings we can be to other people, the lives we can speak into. I mean, I get frustrated in my day job a lot of times, but God has given me a lot of fertile ground. And there are people who believe today because I know how to sell a pair of blue jeans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
God has used every angle of my life. And I spent a lot of my 20s trying to tell God to make me a gospel music singer. You know what I mean? Like make it. It was so funny because it was innocent and earnest, but I used to try to kind of tell God how to use me because he gave me certain gifts and talents, right? And I just assumed that meant that's how he would use me. I mean, he had something entirely different in mind. So, and now that I'm listening to him, it's a lot easier to be a blessing, and there's no pressure. When you're having to sing night after night after night and prepare those vocals all the time. And there's a lot of pressure in that if God's not paving the way.
In it. Right.
But when God paves the way, you just magically get invited onto podcasts, and God puts the right people in your path to be your partner, to pray for you, even if you never actually pursue ministry together, to that like-minded spirit. And that happens in our homes too. God will provide you the right partner for the right family at the right time if you will stay the course with him. And I'm a living testimony of that.
Yeah.
That's my message.
I know that one last thing, I know a lot of young women have this Disney type version of what love is, and that they can change them, and they can, it'll change and things like that. But what if someone is attracted and involved with someone that believes in other gods?
I believe in other gods, and I'll tell you why. The Bible says they exist. I just believe that they're demons. I believe people ask all the kinds of crazy questions. Do you believe in aliens? Do you believe in ghosts? I believe that human beings encounter things they cannot explain, and they will call them all kinds of things. They'll call them angels or gods or demons or ghosts or aliens, whatever. The Bible very, very clearly spells out that there is more around us that we cannot see than we can. There's, principalities and powers, and the prince of the air is Satan himself. So the things we verbalize about ourselves are really important. It's important that we speak blessings over our children and not curses. Yes. It's important that something as simple as saying, I am well. When somebody asks you how you're doing, I am very well. I think that can bring healing into our body. And I know that sounds crazy, but words matter, and the pronouncements you make over yourself, the things you put into the air, Satan hears that too. And yes, there are spirits, and yes, there are other gods, but worshiping another god, everyone worships. The atheist worships. Everyone worships. All spirits bear fruit, and everyone worships. What we choose is who and how. I choose to worship God through the perfect person of Christ Jesus and his indwelling spirit in me. That is true and perfect worship. That is my reasonable act of service on this earth. I'm a living sacrifice. However, there are other gods to whom you may give worship. Some people worship their children. They revolve their entire world around this little being that God gave to you to bring up in fear and admonition of the Lord. Why are you in fear and admonition? Why are you the minion of your child? Why are you and it's not that you don't love your children and do a million things for them. Of course you do, but they are not the object of your worship. They're not the center of your universe. And we get all kinds of things out of place. So if you're in a relationship with someone who is not a believer in Yahweh, the God of the universe, then that's an absolute stop, full stop, because they will bring things into your life. And if you are in a sexual relationship with this person, they will potentially bring things into your body that you never intended to be there.
Yeah.
And that's in the Bible.
Yes.
We have to be careful. Union is not just marriage. It's the physical act as well. And women have to be far more careful than men in that regard. None of us should be engaging in those things outside of marriage, but we're the receptacle. We're the vessel. We carry the next generation, and the blessings and curses we bring onto our own bodies will go to the next generation. In the Bible, women carried blessings and men spoke them. There's a difference. Now, that's not exclusively true, but those are things that really matter. We have to be very careful with our words and very careful what we bring into our homes, into our bodies. And so I would say it's a full stop. If they worship someone other than Yahweh, you have to stop. Because it's one thing to be Catholic and Pentecostal, Baptist and Methodist.
Right.
You're starting to get into some semantics at that point, as opposed to you worship potentially a demon or
Right.
nothing at all, or nature, or the tree in the backyard, or whatever it is. And I worship a true and living God.
Not to
That's
mention your actual foundational um, morals will be so different. And that
absolutely,
is the hardest thing to combine and it live in a way that's healthy.
absolutely true. Yeah. A lot of differences can be overcome, but God, family, country, those three sets of beliefs, those are really hard, you know. And now we have family members who are married just from different cultures in how they
Mhm.
believe. And sometimes their faith journey has been strained and stretched just because
Yeah.
there are some cultural pieces that may or may not be completely biblical. And you have to overcome those as well. And you
Yeah.
can. It's
You
just,
can.
it's never easy. But
Hmm.
and seeking God's blessing, asking God's favor, and letting Him lead is always the way. And God can't lead someone who doesn't believe in Him or who worships someone else. Even if,
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen a handful of relationships where the object of that other person's worship was their partner. And
Hmm.
that's unhealthy too.
Yep. So I think where we basically came to a conclusion on, and you were very mature, even though you were immature at the time, you were very mature in the fact that when it came down to it, what you came to the conclusion of was the importance of finding that very narrow path of what is our goal? What is our main goal? And then how do we get there? So, and using the Bible to ensure complete clarity and truth.
Absolutely.
Um, that was very mature because a lot of people, they wouldn't have known what to do. They would have just fought. So the
Right.
fact that you guys came to that conclusion together and agreed upon it alone shows a lot of maturity and that God's hand was in it.
God was absolutely in it. And He placed the right people around us too. You
Yeah.
know, I think that's one thing too. Young believers sometimes feel like they have to have everything all figured out. And what you realize by the time you're on this side of the journey is you never have everything all figured out. So taking a good godly mentor, I say this to young moms sometimes. I'm like, if your mother wasn't the example you want to follow, you need to go find the best person you know and find their mom and let
Yeah.
that be your mothering mentor, because you should have one. You need someone who's not going to judge you, who's just going to listen, and who might be able to say, well, have you tried this? You know, something that worked for them. The worst source of information for a 20 something dating right now is another 20 something dating right now,
Hmm.
because they don't know anything else that you don't know. Someone in their 40s, someone who's been married 20 years, is going to have more information than you. You know, someone who um, and that's one of the things that in the Catholic Church, a lot of the premarital counseling is done by priests who've never been married.
Right. It doesn't make any sense.
What are they offering? You know, and
Right.
we're a Dave Ramsey family as far as following those financial principles and stuff. But he talks about what you need to talk about in premarital counseling. And there's some really basic things. So there's a lot of resources that don't have to be formal premarital counseling. We sent our daughter and her husband through Financial Peace University. Neither one of them had any debt. They weren't bad with money. It wasn't that. It was, this course teaches you how to talk about it. It's more
Mm.
in how you communicate. Ultimately, even coming from different faith systems, communication is what makes it possible.
Yes.
If you've got the same goal and you can figure out how to communicate without screaming and yelling and judging and belittling and saying things you never get back and making those scars, and taking a godly partner to help you facilitate good communication, God will work. It will
Yeah.
work. God will move, because that communication is everything. And I think for all of the social media and all the ways that we can communicate now, we've never been worse at it. Truly, with interpersonal communication, we've just never been worse at doing it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we close out?
Really, just that there is hope I'm available to anyone who just needs somebody to talk to. I'm happy to mentor other Christian women. And, if you need resources, reach out and I'd be happy to put you in touch with people who can be helpful. And if you do it God's way, his way is always the best way.
Perfect. Yes, I agree. Thank you so much to our listeners. Holly Rennels will have different ways to contact her in the description of the audio and the video. So you're more than welcome to reach out if you need to. And if you want to reach out to me, if you would like to be a guest or have any questions or ideas, I'm happy to listen. Just email me at boundbygracepodcast@gmail.com. And then please join us on Facebook group at Bound by Grace Podcast. And of course, you know our website, boundbygracepodcast.com. So I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you again for being here, Holly.
Thank you.
Bye.